just want to point out to people who believe that everything happens in 7 years, that when you go and you look in the book of Revelation, at Revelation, when the in chapter 6, when the sixth seal is open, Revelation 6:12 through 13, that you see the same events happening that are in Matthew 24 and verse 29. And Matthew 24, 15 through 21 lets you know that when verse 15 happens, the time of great tribulation begins. And we know that the Antichrist reigns for the entire last 3.5 years of the 7 year period. If the first day of his reign is considered great tribulation, then all 3.5 years of his reign would be considered great tribulation. It says in Matthew 24 and 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So that means that tribulation has to be over. That ends the Antichrist reign. That ends the 7 year period. It says immediately after the tribulation of those days are over, the sun's going to be darkened. The moon's not going to give its light. Another place says the moon will be turned to blood, and the powers of heaven or the stars of heaven would be shaken. So when you get to Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 and 13, you will see the same events happening as Matthew 24:29. And I wanted to point something out right quick to you. In the fifth seal of Revelation, you will see that the saints are being killed. And when the fifth seal is opened, the saints are being killed. And there's a question asked to them, or they ask a question: how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and take vengeance on those who are on the earth? Right? It's in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 9. It says, and when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be killed. Now, when the fifth seal is open, for sure, there's the killing of the saints. And we know, according to Revelation chapter 20, verses 4 through 6, that the great tribulation believers who are in the earth during the reign of the Antichrist will be killed during the entire reign of the Antichrist. So when you get to through the events of the fifth seal, and you come to the events of the sixth seal, and these cosmic signs happen, you know that the 7 year period is over, because they're only going to be persecuted and beheaded by the Antichrist until the end of his reign. So when people tell you that everything happens in 7 years, it doesn't. Even in Daniel chapter 8, what was it, verses 4, Daniel chapter 8, verses 13 through 14. Let me show you something I just seen recently. Daniel chapter 8, 13 through 14. Let me show you how there's at least 1,040 days that's extended outside of the end of the 7 year period. So in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 13, it says this: then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, which spake, how long shall be the vision? Listen to what it's talking about. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation? Now we know that the vision of daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, or the abomination that maketh desolate, happens in the middle of the week, according to Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27. He places the abomination that maketh desolate in the midst, or in the middle of the week. So the question was, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation? What about it? To give both the sanctuary, the temple, and the host, the Jewish people, to be trodden underfoot. How long is this vision of the temple being taken over by the Antichrist and the Jews being trodden under the Antichrist's foot? He says in verse 14, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. What defiles the sanctuary? It is the abomination that maketh desolate. When does the abomination that make it desolate take place? It takes place at the midpoint of the 7 years. When will the host of the Jews be given into the Antichrist's hands to be trampled under his foot? At the midpoint of 7 years. Not one day of the first 3.5 years will the sanctuary or the Jews or the people be given into the hands of the Antichrist to be trodden under his foot. So this this is this 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Well, the sanctuary is not even defiled to the midpoint of the 7 years. So you cannot start this 2,300 days at least until the temple is defiled. And when does that happen? At the midpoint of the 7 years, not in the first 3.5 years. And the people given into his hands to be trampled on his foot, that doesn't happen during the first 3.5 years. It doesn't begin until the midpoint of the 7 years. So when he's asked about when will these things be, how long will this vision be? And then he says it's going to be at least 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. That lets you know that when the Antichrist goes out of power on the 1,260th day into this 2,300 days before the sanctuary can be cleansed, that the sanctuary is not cleansed as soon as the Antichrist goes out of power. It's at least another 1,040 days that transpire after the Antichrist reign is over before the temple is cleansed. So if Jesus comes to earth to begin his kingdom on earth, as the preacher believes and many believe, at the end of the 7 years, the last day of the Antichrist reign, the next day Jesus comes to begin his reign on earth, how could the sanctuary still be uncleansed for another 1,040 days if Jesus comes at the end of the 7 years, the very next day after the Antichrist goes out of power and begins his millennial reign? And there's another almost 3 years before the sanctuary can be cleansed, based upon a year being 360 days, each day, month having 30 days equal in it to come up with the 1,260 days. So it's almost another 3 years before Jesus cleanses his temple. If he comes at the end of 7 years, he doesn't come at the end of 7 years. And I teach you in my videos how that the time of great tribulation does not end at the end of the end of the 7 year period. That the time of great tribulation ends for the church at the end of the 7 year period, because we only go through 3.5 years of great tribulation. Jesus comes to get us out of the earth, Revelation 6:14, when the heaven splits as a scroll, Jesus enters our atmosphere. And then after that, you see them proclaiming that the wrath of the Lamb is about to begin. And then when you go to Revelation chapter 7 and verse 9, you see a great multitude was taken out of the earth. And then you go down to verses 13 and 14 of Revelation chapter 7, right? And you will see that the ones that were just taken out of the earth in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 14, when Jesus entered our atmosphere, was the church. He took them out of the earth at the end of 7 years. Why? Because the time of great tribulation, the trumpets and the bowls, do not happen during the 7 years. They happen after the 7 year period is over. Therefore, the church only goes through 3.5 years of great tribulation. Jesus comes, takes us out of the earth at the end of the 7 years, takes us back to heaven, and then he begins to pour out those bowls and sound those trumpets on the earth. So the time of great tribulation is continues longer than the 3.5 year period of the Antichrist reign, but it was shortened for the saints because we only went through 3.5 years of it, and then we're taken out of the earth. Also, remember that 1,040 days puts you almost 3 years outside of the end of the Antichrist reign. Don't you believe that Jesus, if he comes on the 1,261st day, the first day after the Antichrist goes out of power, that he would cleanse his temple at that time? Surely he would. Surely he would not leave his temple unclean for almost another 3 years. But he does, because he only comes to take the church out of the earth, goes back to heaven, and then after the trumpets are completed, which they will last for at least a minimum of 3 years and 11 months, according to the events of the fifth trumpet, which lasts for 5 months, and the two witnesses coming on the scene at the sounding of the sixth trumpet, and their ministry is 3 years and 6 months. So that's a minimum of 3 years and 11 months of greater times of tribulation that happen after the 7-year period is over. And that is when Jesus will punish all the people of the earth who did bad things to Christians and other people who didn't deserve it. He does not punish them during the 7 years. All right, if you want to watch my complete layout on the book of Revelation and see what I'm saying, go on YouTube. You're probably there. You're watching this video and look up this title, PT1, the letter P, the letter T, the number 1. PT1, the pre-wrath rapture and the third coming of Jesus. Yes, I said the third coming of Jesus. The pre-wrath rapture and the third coming of Jesus. You will see there's PT2, PT3, PT4, PT5, 5 videos under this title. The PT5, the pre-wrath rapture, third coming of Jesus. And the third coming of Jesus is easily explained for people that don't believe there'll be a third coming. We know that Jesus has to come back to the earth and rapture the church out of the earth before he pours out his wrath on the earth. Even pre-trib believes this, right? So after he raptures out of the earth, what does he do? He takes us back to heaven. Once he completes pouring out his wrath on the earth, he must come again, right, for his millennial reign on the earth in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. That's the third coming of Jesus. Jesus came the first time as a baby. He's coming the second time to get the church out of the earth, and he's coming back the third time to begin his millennial reign. Now, you might have disagreed with me before I made the explanation on the third coming of Jesus, right? But now you don't. All right, this is Brother Bill, Pastor Windsor Chase Ministries, here in Ozark, Crazo, Alabama. Y'all go and watch the video, and God bless you, and bye-bye.